Hey everybody, what's up? Jim Cirile and Tanya Klein here from Coverage Inc., the leader in screenplay analysis, development, and editing services since 2002. How you doing today, Tanya?
Very well. How about yourself?
I'm doing pretty good. So I think we're here to talk about something that is near and dear to all of our hearts today, right?
Yes, we're going to talk about getting notes.
Yeah.
And the reason we're going to talk about getting notes is because a couple of weeks ago, we got an email from a client essentially saying, "Oh my God, I got a lot of notes. It'll be a major rewrite, and I don't know how to handle it."
Yeah.
So we figured we're going to do a little video about how to handle notes. It doesn't matter if there are notes from a coverage service or if they're notes from a producer or a manager. The point is, as a writer, you will be getting a lot of notes throughout your career, and you have got to learn how to handle it and how to take notes. And it is a skill set, absolutely, but it is one that you absolutely need to learn. And, one reason being, of course, that your work and your scripts are going to get better. And the other reason being, if you cannot take notes, then you won't be working in this business for very long.
Yeah, I want to add also that we're not going to mention this person's name, but I think it took a lot of bravery of her to reach out and ask for help, because this is just one of those things that, writers are just assumed to know how to do. And she said, I'm just looking at her note right here. She said, "I've never done a rewrite this massive before. I was reluctant to reach out to you, but honestly, I don't know where to start. Do you have any thoughts on a strategy for how to move forward?" And, good for her for doing that. Yeah, it's not an easy thing to do, to tackle notes, especially when it's a lot of notes. So let's talk about
Yeah.
some ways to do that.
Yeah, so I think the first thing for any writer, for all of us, is we gotta deal with our egos. Because,
Yeah.
of course, look, we send out our work. We've worked hard. We send it out, and then we get a shit ton of notes. It hurts our ego. It's tough. It's not fun. It sucks.
Yeah.
So the first thing you need to do is absorb the blow. And so I think before, what always helps is maybe, you read the coverage and you go, ah! So maybe you want to put it away for a week
Yeah. Set
before
it aside.
before looking at it again. Always a good idea to do that if you have the time. If they're producer notes and you need to turn around, it's a different story.
Yeah, a little cooling off period can make a big difference. Especially if the notes kind of like anger you or you really don't agree with the notes. We often have that sort of knee-jerk reaction because, again, it's partly ego. And, the easiest thing in the world is to say, the reader did not thoroughly read my script or did not understand my script or skimmed. It's easy to say that and kind of let ourselves off the hook. And sure, sometimes that does happen. But oftentimes what happens is we're just not emotionally prepared to hear what that person is saying just yet. And by putting something aside for a week or two or three until you kind of cool down a little bit, you might be able to sort of kind of, okay, let me try to hear what this person's saying and see if there's anything to it.
Exactly. So after that period, you're still looking at a mountain of notes.
Yeah.
So how do you approach that? One thing that tends to work very well is start small. Start with the little notes like, oh, there's a character name misspelled on page 65.
Yeah.
Okay, start there. That's easy. Basically, it's, slowly getting back into the world of the script. Because if you have been, not immersed in this world and the script in a few weeks, you do need to ease back in.
Well, yes, that's of course true. But Tanya, let's talk a little bit about how you and I do it specifically, because we have like our method that
Yeah.
we developed that kind of works for us. Talk about how you and I tackle the process. So when we get some notes back, after we set them aside, usually for a period of time, may not be a couple of weeks, sometimes it's a couple of days, but I don't think we ever look at the notes right away. right? I mean, like you said,
Well, it's
unless
also a
there's,
time issue, but yes.
yeah, yeah.
But yeah,
But,
so
but
but yeah, the first step is to, I mean, if you have a writing partner, discuss the notes with your writing partner. Go through the coverage and have a pen next to you
yeah,
or a highlighter, whatever
highlighter,
works for
red
you,
pen. Yeah.
and just make notes in the margin or just check mark. Oh, yeah, that's a good note. Check mark. Or if there are notes that you might need to think about, question mark. Just go through it and see uh, what resonates with you.
And here, yeah, exactly. And here's the key thing, especially if you have a writing partner, that this is a little bit easier because you can kind of use each other as a sounding board. If you don't have a writing partner, maybe bring in a friend or someone whose opinion you trust, family member, anybody like that that you can kind of bounce ideas off of, because that does help. But I think the key thing here is we always try to give even the notes that seem ridiculous or the ones that we don't agree with at all, right? From like, that's insane. We discuss them anyway. We give them a fair hearing because often there's what's called the note within the note, right? And lots of times what happens is readers will detect something is amiss in an area. They don't necessarily know exactly what it is. Sometimes they do, and some hopefully they'll give you a specific actionable, like this is the problem, do this. But sometimes they'll give you a note that's just it's not quite right, or they may not know exactly what's wrong. But what it does is it indicates there's something amiss there. And by discussing that note with the other person, you can be like, well, is it really what they're saying, or is it that we need more of Larry? Is there just not enough Larry here? And that's why we're not feeling this discussion, because we haven't had enough of Larry to understand where Larry is coming from. So that might be the note within the note. And by digging in on the notes that you might dismiss, you might actually go, oh, okay, well, I don't agree with that, but let's add a line here that might address that.
Exactly. And because you mentioned adding a line, and sometimes that's all it takes. Absolutely. But
Sometime.
yeah, sometimes it's more than that because what also happens is that writers, look at a note that really is a major note, like whatever, the protagonist is passive,
Right.
or the structure doesn't work because we're not hitting act two until page 50.
Yeah.
So those are major notes that require major rewrites, and the writers kind of address it by adding a line or two. So
Yeah.
know if it's a big note or a small note.
Yeah, and this kind of goes back to what I was saying before about the notes we immediately, might dismiss or go, oh no, that's ridiculous. The ones we tend to dismiss the most are the hard ones. Those are the ones you really need to give some real hearing to, because, if the note is hard is not a reason to dismiss it. Yeah, you might need to cut 10 pages out of your act one. You might need to add 10 pages to your act two. These are more invasive notes that none of us like to get, but that doesn't mean that they're invalid. So give those notes a chance.
If you have notes that are big, like structural, maybe you want to break out the good old index cards to see
Right.
if your story really progresses the way it should, or if a character disappears for all of Act Two, but is
Yeah.
supposed to be a main character. So,
Right.
do some
Hey,
art.
here's a great index card trick, and that is to color code your character names, right? We've done this a couple times, Tanya, where we've broken out the index cards, we put them all out on the board or on the table, or whatever it is, with just a quick description of every single scene. Then we go back and we use a specific color for every major character,
And
and this
just
will
by
tell
the
you.
way, nowadays there's an app for that. Just
There
saying.
is, yeah, and Final Draft will do that for you as well. You can do that stuff, but hey, sometimes it's easier to just do it by hand. The whole tactile experience of it. But yeah, you can quickly see like, oh, there's not enough yellow in the first half of Act Two. This character that I thought was in there, we need more of that character. So it's a great thing to be able to tell you very quickly. It's a quick visual representation of the ebb and flow and your character presence in your script. Um, but basically, so Tanya, when by the time we finish this process of going through all the notes, right, crossing out the ones we discuss and then disagree with, putting a question mark next to the ones we're unsure about, and a check mark or highlight or something around the ones that are definitely yes, do it, right? We have our hit list, right? And so the hit list, once we've gotten rid of the stuff we don't agree with, we usually have, let's say, 5 to 10 notes that are definitely, yes, let's do this, on varying levels of difficulty. Some of those are going to be easy, some not so easy. And then the question mark ones are, let's ruminate that. Let's consider it. Maybe let's try a few solutions in the script and see if it works, and then maybe remove them. But basically, that gives us an approachable sort of game plan, you
Yeah.
know, to how to take on the rewrite. And when we do, as like you said, you start with the easy stuff first, suddenly it becomes a much less daunting task to undertake. And before you know it, you've already done like 3 of the 10 notes on there, and it only took you less than an hour. And you're like, oh, okay, I might as well just keep going. That's not so bad.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, part of it is really mental. We have to, psych
Yeah,
yourself up. So that's really part of it. And also what you will find is in discussing the notes, thinking about the notes, making a hit list, you will come up with some very interesting stuff. New scenes,
right.
new depth to your characters that you had not thought of before. So that's number one. Also, what you might find, number two, is that once you do some of those notes, wow, the others might not actually be as big anymore because
Right.
wow, some of those notes actually took care of themselves. Like for
Yeah.
example, we're just working on a script and we just got a bunch of notes, and basically a lot of the notes took care of themselves once we actually restructured, because act one was just
Yeah.
too long. So we cut 10 pages. We got rid of a couple of characters that really were unnecessary. And it's like, okay. So
Right.
a lot of the other stuff really has taken care of itself.
Yeah, exactly. The whole ripple effect throughout the script, all solved by making those cuts in Act One. And guess what? We didn't need that character that we wound up
Yeah.
removing. I want to say one other thing to the one other benefit to the whole putting things aside. It's not just to allow yourself to cool down, but a very interesting psychological thing happens, I think, which is, you know, I always read the notes through, they anger me. I get frustrated, and I'm like, the reader's an idiot. And then I put the notes aside. But what happens is, sort of in the back of my mind over the next week or two, I'm kind of my subconscious is working on that, and so you, even if I still think the note is ridiculous or the reader's an idiot, I'm still cogitating on that. So by the time I get back to looking at the script again a second time, not only doesn't it sting, but I might have actually already come up with some ideas to solve this problem that I didn't think was an actual problem. And then in my head, I'll go, see, the reader's an idiot. It only took like an extra sentence or paragraph here to explain this character's rationale. They should have seen that. And of course, that's just the way we writers rationalize things. But hey, any way you can solve a problem is a good way to solve a problem. And if you want to blame the reader, go ahead. That's perfectly
Yeah.
fine.
But so the main takeaway should be learn how to take notes. You will get notes the entirety of your writing career. Some notes will be great, and some notes will be terrible. Actors, you will get notes
Yeah.
from, anyone and everyone involved in the
Yeah.
movie. And you, as the writer, you have to be able to take those notes and you have to be able to run with them. That's your
And those
job.
notes will be of varying levels of quality. They'll be of varying levels of niceness. Some people will like the script more than others, and the notes will reflect that. It doesn't mean that the person who liked, who was nicer on the page than someone else, is any more or less correct. That could just be their approach or their take. It doesn't mean that the notes from either the nicer person or the less nice person are wrong. It's just a lot of it is bedside manner. So as a writer, you just need to be be like water, as Bruce Lee said, right? Just be like water. Just absorb it, make the script better, and be that easy to work with, malleable writer who's like, yeah, I love notes, bring it on.
Exactly. And as always, if you have any questions, you can reach us at info@coverageinc.com. That's ink with a K.
Please smash that like button and please hit the notification bell, folks, because that tells the algorithm that we exist. And we will see you in the next video.
Empty your mind. Be formless, shapeless, like water.